We need somebody in Washington like Chuck, who's outside the D.C. bubble, someone that has decades of business experience, is a genuine member of the community. It's time we send somebody to Washington that isn't looking to divide us further or worry about playing party politics. It's time we send someone that has a sense of public service, someone who's more concerned about doing right by the people than making a career of being a politician. Chuck's entrepreneurial spirit will help bring prosperity back to Delaware. He will focus on people-first policies instead of getting caught up in the troublesome divide we've grown to expect from politicians. Chuck is a leader. It's become increasingly impossible for him to stand by while so many of us Americans are burnt out by the American democracy. I'm proud to introduce tonight an alternative. Please join me in welcoming my good friend, Chuck Boyce.
Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. A lot of people here wondered why I chose to formally announce my candidacy here in Old Newcastle. As the meeting place for colonial assemblies, the courthouse served as a crucial location in the fight for American independence. In June 1776, during the height of the Revolution, founders such as Caesar Rodney, Thomas McCain, and George Reed met in the courthouse to declare separation from Pennsylvania and independence from Great Britain to form the first state of Delaware. I consider this location to be one of the cornerstones in American history and democracy, and find it appropriate that here I formally announce that I am running to be Delaware's next United States Senator. I've always felt a calling to public office, and I think a lot of that sense of service was instilled in me by my dad. His name was Henry Boyce. And he served in the U.S. Army at the height of the Vietnam War. Well, we didn't really talk much about his time in the Army. I knew he had been wounded and spent 7 months in Japan recovering before he returned home. This, coupled with his exposure to Agent Orange, would come to cause him to battle some serious health problems in the future. When Dad returned home, he and Mom were married and got a good job at a local GM plant. They bought a house, had 2 kids. There were tough times, but we all got through it together. It wasn't until much later that I was exposed to the bureaucracy of Veterans Affairs. My father was diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma. He underwent several surgeries to remove his cancer. A PET scan was ordered every 6 months to monitor his health. It was explained to us that the PET scans weren't available at the hospital in East Orange, and the VA would provide transportation to another facility in either Midtown Manhattan or Brooklyn, New York. Both trips were at least 90 minutes from his home, and he most certainly passed civilian facilities that had PET scanners available. However, the bureaucracy of the VA insisted that someone recovering from cancer commute from Jersey to Manhattan to see how his treatment was progressing. In 2012, my dad's health had declined to the point where it no longer made sense for my parents to stay in New Jersey, and they joined us here in Delaware. He was about 72 at the time and was receiving all of his medical care through the VA health system. His care required an average of 6 to 8 appointments per month. Although the VA system had switched to electronic filing, we had the hardest time transferring his records from the VA hospital in New Jersey to the one here in Wilmington so that he could continue to receive care. For example, during an appeal regarding his level of disability, we had to travel back up to East Orange to pick up boxes of his records and copies of his scans. Finally, after we assembled all the records, the appeal for an adjustment in his disability coverage could finally be submitted. It was also during this time he was prescribed a round of hyperbaric treatments. Again, no chamber was available at the Wilmington Hospital, and they suggested that we bring my father to Wilmington so he could take a shuttle bus every day from the VA hospital in Wilmington to the facility in Philadelphia. This was about the same time these kinds of absurdities were being exposed in the VA. With a very firm approach, we were finally able to get approval for him to receive the treatments at St. Francis Hospital in Wilmington. I'm not sharing this story with you to complain about being an advocate for my father. My family and I did everything we could for his well-being. I'm sharing this because not every veteran has a support system that they can lean on to ensure that they get the proper care that they deserve. Because of the sacrifice of our veterans while serving, it is our responsibility to make sure they are well taken care of when they get home. This means providing the best possible medical care available for their physical needs, as well as ending the stigma for mental health treatment. Our veterans come home to face unacceptable wait times at VA hospitals. Billions of dollars have been spent over the past several years implementing solutions, but these attempts have failed to make a noticeable difference. Politicians introduced the Choice Program in hopes that it would help. However, new hires were distributed evenly throughout the system instead of addressing the facilities with the largest backlogs. In addition to delays continued for veterans seeking approval to see civilian doctors. This program has simply not been as successful as it needs to be. Delaware has one of the highest enlistment rates in the country, with 1 in 10 Delawareans joining the armed forces. Family of service members account for nearly a quarter of Delaware's population. Most veterans currently receiving care served during the Vietnam era, and their families, just like mine, are forced to navigate a broken system in hopes of receiving treatment for their loved ones. Families of service members deserve to have an ally in D.C. with their best interests in mind. Our veterans and their families deserve to have answers for the inefficiency in the VA. This is simply not a place for guesswork. If elected, I will advocate for the strategic use of our resources dedicated to giving our veterans and their families the best treatment possible in a timely manner. For our veterans coming home today, we must ensure a smooth transition to civilian life by ending the senseless bureaucracy that prevents them from using the skills they learned during the service. If we are going to take the time to teach them skills they are capable of carrying out in a war zone, we need to make sure the curriculum meets the requirements necessary to carry out those same careers once they're back home. We have truck drivers, flight engineers, and medical technicians that come home to find their certifications don't carry over to the private sector. As a small business owner, I've seen up close how unnecessary regulations not only burden our veterans, but burden entrepreneurs as well. These regulations create a cost of business that small businesses simply can't overcome. Too many startups can't make the inroads to compete in various markets. We must reduce senseless and outdated regulations to give our communities a fighting shot. For far too long, a rotating class of career politicians have represented Delawareans. They have played a game of musical chairs with the highest positions in our government, and many of us have accepted this as the Delaware way. These people have never faced the challenges of being a private employer or even having worked for one. It's time Delaware sends someone with private sector experience to D.C. who understands the struggles of being an employer and will fight on the side of America's workforce. Since 2000, over 5 million manufacturing jobs have moved overseas because of job-killing government regulations. In Washington, I will reignite the achievability of the American dream for everyone. We can encourage growth in developing industries by preparing communities for the modern workforce. Whether that means adjusting policy to attract manufacturing jobs back to Delaware or redirecting funding to better prepare our communities to succeed in the trades, medicine, or technology, we must direct students towards careers in growing fields. Over the course of the next several decades, the level of innovation will allow students to seek employment in the fields that provide prosperity and financial security. Adjusting what is taught in our schools and how it is taught will allow families from all communities to achieve success. Many of the technical and medical programs that are being fostered in our middle and high schools are providing opportunities for graduates to immediately begin relevant careers and thrive. It is imperative that we provide these alternatives to a system that leaves students with crippling student loan debts. Many students choose this path with the false hope it will provide a return on their investment. It is time for the taxpayer to stop backing student loans for jobs that simply no longer exist. Encouraging entire generations to pay for an education for an unachievable career goal perpetuates a system that creates a spike in pension payouts to retired professors instead of allowing schools to reinvest in programs that show opportunity for economic growth. When preparing students for post-secondary education and beyond, it is time that Americans stop demonizing our trade programs. Two of the fastest growing industries in our country are technology and medical technology. We are fortunate to have the ability of our youngest generation to thrive in these industries and show our students their worth. For these reasons, I have chosen to run for the United States Senate. Through my accomplishment in the private sector, I have developed a proven track record of bringing people together to forge new solutions. I expect at times there will be tough choices, but I assure you I will not shrink from my duty to make them. It's time to put an end to divisive party politics, crippling DC, and focus instead on common ground solutions. It's time the Delaware way works for all Delawareans and not just an elite few. It's time we get our priorities straight.
So we just wrapped up here my formal announcement on the historic green in Old Newcastle. I want to thank everybody for coming out. And remember, we are going to get our priorities straight.
This message is paid for by the committee to elect Chuck Boyce.